We just carved out some time out of nowhere. Pastor Melissa and I, this week, between Sundays, between NCCP Anywheres, between the second and the third week of Under the Sun, flew to Jamaica to celebrate our 26th wedding anniversary. The best part of the trip, while we were there on the resort, no concept of time. Welcome to NCCP Anywhere for the weekend of June the 21st, 2026. It's one of the reasons we got married in 2000, because the math is easy. 26 years married to my best friend. It's been a glorious week. One of the best things about the trip, again, as I mentioned, no concept of time, it was liberating. Every once in a while, I would look down at my wrist, and this was missing. Not only did I not carry my phone, I didn't wear my Apple Watch. I was reminded each time, and it took a little bit of time, no pun intended, to get used to not having my watch on. We had no idea. In fact, Pastor Melissa didn't even pack her watch. I left mine in the room. She didn't even take it on the trip. But we had no idea what time it was, which was great, and we had nowhere to be. Something changed when time moved to our wrist. The invention of the wristwatch, of all the fabulous things about clocks and hourglasses and water clocks and all the different ways, sundials that we have marked time over the centuries, and you can do a simple Google search to read about some of those things and those inventions. It was the wristwatch that didn't just change the way that we carried time, it changed our relationship with time. For centuries, just prior to that, a pocket watch lived in your pocket. You only pulled it out when necessary, when you absolutely had to know what time it was. You reached for it. It took some effort. You had to get it out of your pocket. Then you had to clip it open. You looked at it, you closed the lid, you put it back in your pocket. Time was consulted. It wasn't constantly present. But when the wristwatch arrived, something subtle happened. Time moved from our pocket to our bodies. Instead of checking time occasionally, we began seeing it constantly. Every glance became a reminder. What time is it? What should I be doing? Where should I be next? Am I late? Am I behind? Did I accomplish enough today? The wristwatch transformed time from something we consulted into something that we carried with us. If we're honest, most of us don't wear watches anymore. We wear supervisors. Our smartwatches don't simply tell us the time. I got my Apple Watch a few years ago, and ironically, I was looking for just a regular wristwatch. I even went into a jeweler and tried to tell the jeweler that, I was getting distracted by pulling out my phone to see what time it was. And then when I would do that, I would get caught, searching social media and doing those sorts of things, or finding a message waiting for me. So I said, I wanted just a regular watch. And she didn't listen to a word I said and said, oh, you should get an Apple Watch or a smartwatch. Well, I eventually did. And I'm not so sure I'm better off, because our watches have become supervisors. They don't just simply tell us the time. We're wearing computers. We're wearing our administrative assistant on our wrist, all wrapped up into one, 3 in 1. Sounds Trinitarian. No sacrilege intended. They tell us, mine certainly does, and I'm obsessed with this, how many steps I've walked today. I've walked 1,764 steps. Your heart rate, It gives you alerts if your heart rate is elevated. You didn't sleep well. It gives you a sleep score. Pastor Melissa loves that feature. What I love is it says it's time to stand up, so you kind of get scolded by your watch. It's time to move. You have 15 minutes to close your exercise ring. Time to exercise now. Get up and go. It's as if we've invited a tiny manager onto our wrist. And every few minutes, it reminds us that we're not doing enough. Solomon would probably not just smile at this, he would laugh historically at this, how far we've come. Because Ecclesiastes is written by a man who spent much of his life trying to maximize everything. More projects, more achievements, more productivity, more wealth, as we've spoken about for the last couple of weeks, more accomplishments. Yet eventually he discovered you can fill every minute of your calendar and still miss the purpose of your life. And so here are these words from chapter 3 as he says, there's a season for everything. Some translations say time. And a time for every matter under the heavens. A time for giving birth and a time for dying. A time for planting and a time for uprooting what was planted. A time for killing and a time for healing. A time for tearing down and a time for building up. A time for crying and a time for laughing. A time for mourning and a time for dancing. A time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones. A time for embracing and a time for avoiding embraces. A time for searching and a time for losing. A time for keeping and a time for throwing away. A time for tearing and a time for repairing. A time for keeping silent and a time for speaking. A time for loving and a time for hating. A time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from all their hard work? I have observed the task that God has given human beings. God has made everything fitting in its time, but has placed eternity in their hearts without enabling them to discover what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there's nothing better for them but to enjoy themselves and to do what's good while they live. Moreover, this is the gift of God that all people should eat, drink, and enjoy the results of their hard work. I know that whatever God does will last forever. It's impossible to add to it or to take away from it. God has done this so that people are reverent before him. Whatever happens has already happened, and whatever will happen has already happened before. And God looks after what is driven away. So this is a reminder that life is not merely measured in minutes. Life is lived in seasons. A farmer doesn't stare at his watch to make sure the corn is to grow faster. A mother cannot rush a child into adulthood. A grieving person cannot schedule healing for next Thursday at 3:15. Some things happen only in God's time. Blaise Pascal, a 17th century philosopher and mathematician, he observed that many of our problems come from our inability to sit quietly alone. And so that's because our silence, sitting in silence and sitting still, which I have a huge problem with, reminds us that we aren't in control and we just feel like we got to go and do something to get that control. A watch gives us the illusion that we can manage time. Ecclesiastes reminds us that only God governs time. The pocket watch taught us to keep time. The wristwatch taught us to live by time. The smartwatch tempts us to believe we can master time. And that's kind of the progression that we've been on. But Ecclesiastes reminds us that time was never meant for us to master. It was always God's gift to receive. For everything there is a season, Solomon says, and a time for every matter under the sun. This is where Ecclesiastes 3 gets really interesting, because the antidote is not abandoning watches or calendars or planning. They're all necessary tools. Solomon is not anti-timekeeping. He's anti-illusion. The problem isn't keeping time. The problem is believing that By keeping time, we can control life. The antidote is moving from mastery to trust. The watch tells us if you manage your time perfectly, you'll be okay. The smartwatch says optimize more, improve more, track more, accomplish more. But Ecclesiastes says you can manage your schedule and still not be in control of your season. You can have the perfect planner and still experience illness and grief, disappointment, unexpected opportunities, God's interruptions. The watch gives us an illusion of mastery. Ecclesiastes calls us back to trust. The antidote is receiving time as a gift. Notice Solomon's conclusion in the last couple of verses. There is nothing better than to be happy and to do good while they live. Moreover, it is God's gift that we should eat and drink and take pleasure in all that toil. Sounds familiar, right? We heard that earlier in chapter 2 and last week when we visited together on NCCP Anywhere. And so it's repeated here because it's an important truth from God. The word keeps appearing in this text. Gift. The antidote to controlling time is receiving time, receiving it as a gift. This day, this moment, this minute, this second is a gift from God. Think about the difference between a stopwatch and a sunset. Both can be used to kind of monitor our day and time. A stopwatch exists to be measured. A sunset exists to be enjoyed. Many of us live our lives, unfortunately, like stopwatches. God intended much of life to be lived like a sunset. Received, enjoyed, observed, appreciated, not optimized. The antidote is presence. A pocket watch asked, "What time is it?" The smartwatch asked, "What should we be doing next?" Ecclesiastes asked, "Where is God in this moment?" One of the great spiritual disciplines is learning to be present. Not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, today. The season, this conversation, this meal, this worship service, this person you're viewing right here through NCCP Anywhere, this person standing right in front of you. Just be present with them. Jesus gives us this ultimate antidote. And so if we fast forward in our scriptures to the Gospels, we can notice how often Jesus refused to be rushed. People wanted immediate answers, immediate miracles, immediate solutions. Yet Jesus constantly lived according to his timing. He often said, "My hour has not yet come." He was never hurried, never frantic, never panicked, because he trusted the timing. Maybe the goal of life isn't to squeeze more into every minute. Maybe the goal is to be fully present to God in the minutes we have been gifted with. I wear this smartwatch because I feel like it's going to be helpful to manage my life. But Ecclesiastes reminds me that this watch can tell me what time it is. It can tell me a little bit about my exercise history for the day. It can even tell me my appointments. I can get a dreaded message or phone call even on my watch. I can listen to music on my watch. But it cannot tell me what God is doing. It cannot tell me or reveal to me what season that I'm in. It cannot tell me when healing will come. It cannot tell me when God is preparing something new. It cannot tell me how my story ends. So the antidote to keeping time is not throwing away this watch. We can be thankful for this watch. One thing I didn't mention earlier is Blaise Pascal was one of the first to take his pocket watch and tie it around his wrist. So we can thank him for these silly things we wear around our arms, our wrist. Thanks, Mr. Pascal. You should have stuck to philosophy and math. But the antidote, again, not to curse him or throw our watches away. It's remembering that the watch belongs on your wrist, not on your throne. I'm not to worship the details on the face of this watch. God never asked us to control time. He asked us to trust him with it. That may be the central pastoral truth of Ecclesiastes 3. Faith is not mastering the clock. Faith is trusting the God who created all and created the time that we have. And so may God be with you in your rest this week, and may everything under the sun be lived in moments of trust in him who has put you here at this time and in this place. Until we meet again, may God be with you. Amen.